think I can. So yes, now people are starting to attendees. Coming in. See the attendees.
I can. See,
Okay.
16.
Yeah. So wait till 6 o'clock.
And somebody on the phone.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. We've got another minute till 6 o'clock, so we'll wait just a little longer to see who else might join us. My name is Tammy Gaskell, and I'm the director at the Rojan Library. And this program is brought to you by the Columbia County Libraries Association. And we are very happy to have a series of events planned this fall with the Martin Van Buren National Historic Site. Dawn Olson will be giving a presentation today on basically the life and times and introduction to Martin Van Buren. I am unfortunately unable to share Dawn's video. For some reason, we can't get her picture to show, but she is here, and she'll be, you'll be hearing her voice, if not seeing her face. But let's wait just another minute and see if anybody else joins us.
I was going to say, if you want, I could come around the wall and just at least say hello to people.
You can come in my office and say
Is that all right?
Yeah. We're in the same building.
Okay. So you can see them.
I can, yeah. So
Hi, so my name is Dawn, and I have to say that this is not unusual, that there are little glitches in the world of a park ranger, and we carry on. So I'm very happy to be here, and it'll be interesting because I'll be pretending I can see you and trying to make eye contact from the other side of the wall. And I guess if you have questions, we can see them in the chat, and you're welcome to interrupt the conversation, and we'll make some answers happen. So I'm very excited to be here. This is, I guess, the first of four.
the first of four.
Four programs that will be offered by park rangers. And I put my uniform on, so I wanted you to be able to see that I was dressed in the park ranger outfit.
Okay. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, so we have 4 programs, and they will all be on the second. I think they all are on the second Monday of the month. So look for those in the next few months. We've now through December. And I am going to turn it over to Dawn.
Hey, so welcome everyone. I wanted to share a little bit about this bold statement here. I always wanted to be a park ranger, kind of like a question mark. And I should say that I'm a Hudson River Valley native, a 1984 graduate of Taconic Hills. So it was a little bit like memory lane. I drove around Copake on my way here to the library. I used to live on Empire Road, and when I'm part of the class of 1984 from Taconic Hills, and then when I graduated, I always thought I wanted to be a veterinarian's assistant. So I signed on for a 2-year program at SUNY Delhi, and one semester in realized that walking dogs and taking care of cats was fine, but when they were sick, that was not going to be my specialty. So I, as an 18-year-old, boldly knocked on the door of the advisor for the Parks and Recreation program and asked if he would take me under his wing. So that was the first step towards a degree in outdoor recreation and park management and education. And this first picture here that shows me standing on top of Mount Marcy is connected to my early career working at a children's camp here, Camp Fowler in the Adirondacks, and then spending time on the West Coast with outdoor education programs. So I was a science girl in the 90s, and then eventually had to pick one coast or the other. So I landed here back home in Columbia County, and applied for my first seasonal job with the National Park Service in 1997. So that goes along with the picture on the smaller picture there. With my hair's a little shorter there, but, at Martin Van Buren National Historic Site. And I never really thought that a summer job in 1987 would become a 25-year career. But it's good. And then that may be an understatement. it's a great job. My friends are talking about retiring in their early 60s, and I'm all like, nope, this is what I want to do as long as I'm able to. And when I do retire, I'll probably be a seasonal park ranger again, and then travel in the winter season. So and then the picture underneath there, I spent my first few summers at hanging my hat at Martin Van Buren National Historic Site, and then I was a winter seasonal in Hyde Park, first at the Vanderbilt Mansion, and then at the Roosevelt home. So that's just a little bit about me. I started at Martin Van Buren in May of 1997, and I have just trying to get the controls right here. I think the next slide is a picture of the house museum here. It's cooperating. There we go. So I spend more time at President Van Buren's house in some ways than I do my own house. I describe him as my +1. And the best part of the job is being able to meet visitors, whether it's in person at the park or here now with this modern technology of Zoom meetings. And so before I dive into Martin Van Buren's story, I'd like, if possible, I'd like to extend an invitation that you all might come and take a tour. We are open every day from the middle of May until the end of October. And then we tuck the president in for the winter, and that's our planning season to get ready for the next season's school groups. Hopefully our fourth graders will come back next year, and also to plan what our programs will look like. So, and I want to just share a little bit about President Van Buren and if I should share my theme. This is my first time doing a Zoom program, so I'm not nervous. I just am sort of anticipating how it's all going to shake out here. So I do have a little cheat sheet to keep me on task, if you will. But President Van Buren is a member of the second generation of American politicians, and they inherited the challenges of interpreting the Constitution during this time period between American Revolution and American Civil War, one of those lesser known time periods that so it's job security for park rangers. And the way I keep track of Martin Van Buren is that he was so born in 1782, as it shows here, and was one of 8 children whose parents were tavern keepers on the outskirts of Kinderhook. There's a very modern house there now with a blue plaque out front. Martin Van Buren was born here. And I picture him as a young person in the tavern once he had completed a basic education, really at a one-room schoolhouse, that he might have had chores around the tavern. And so sweeping floors, filling adult beverages, eavesdropping on conversations. And the tavern was Kinderhook is about a day's travel south of Albany by horse and carriage pace. So it was a convenient stopping place for local neighbors to catch up on gossip and for travelers to share news from near or from far away. And I like to think that Martin Van Buren's mother recognized the potential in all of her children, and that she was not playing favorites. Having said that, though, she is the one who arranged for him to apprentice with a local lawyer. And the future president would study for 7 years and then pass the bar exam just before his 21st birthday. If I should back up for a minute, that he was 7 years old in 1789 when George Washington was elected president, and then lived a good long life. He passed away also in Kinderhook, and having owned this house for about 20 years in July of 1862. So it's during the second year of American Civil War, and that's during Andrew, I get my presidents mixed up, Abraham Lincoln's presidency. And I do have a quote I like to share from Martin Van Buren. It gives us evidence of his connection to his hometown of Kinderhook, and also his commitment to 40 years of practicing law and practicing politics. So he would say in the opening line of his will, "I, Martin Van Buren of the town of Kinderhook, County of Columbia, State of New York, heretofore governor of the state, and more recently president of the United States, but for the last and happiest years, a farmer in my native town." So it's a little weird that you can't see me, but I'm going to see what this next picture looks like here. So a portrait of Martin Van Buren here that hangs in the house. This is close to holiday season, early December, when there's a candlelight night in Kinderhook, and the house is generally decorated by members of one of the local garden clubs, and when it's not a pandemic, we do an afternoon open house. And in terms of President Van Buren, all of his political career happened before he owned this house. So I'd like to fill in a little bit of that his life can be neatly divided into 20-year periods. And we already covered a little bit about the first part, having 7 brothers and sisters, apprenticing with a local lawyer. He, once he passed the bar, joined the law practice of one of his brothers in Hudson, and was soon to marry a distant cousin, Hannah. And they set up housekeeping first in Columbia County, and then later in Albany. They, just a little bit about the family there. They would have 4 sons, 3 who lived to adulthood, and we'll hear a little bit more about them later on in the program. But Abraham, John, Martin Jr., and Smith. So in birth order, they're also named alphabetically, which is helpful for me to keep them straight. So for Martin Van Buren, he once he gained a little experience as a lawyer, he moved his family to Albany, and quite a few of the cases that he would take on involved small landowners on the outskirts of the patroonships, like the Van Rensselaers to the north of us, and the Livingstons to the south. And those small, they were tenant farmers, to be more accurate, and they felt that they had paid rent enough times over that they should own their property. So Van Buren successfully took on these cases. He was very diligent, looking at all angles, the defense and the opposite team, if you will, the opposite lawyers. And that's a skill that he would continue to practice throughout his political career, which does overlap with his time as a politician. So I tried to think about, like, how would I share that when I'm not at my park. And through his early to mid 20s, Van Buren was a New York State senator, and then was chosen by his peers to represent New York as a United States senator. So that takes him through his 30-something years, and he meets Andrew Jackson as a United States senator, and together they organize what we think of as the Democratic Party of the day. And then he would, this was mentioned in the quote I shared at the beginning, he ran for governor of New York in 1828, the year that Andrew Jackson ran for president, and that was to line up support here in the North for a Southern presidential candidate. And his reward would be an appointment by Andrew Jackson to the position of Secretary of State. So through his 40s, he's Secretary of State and then Vice President for Andrew Jackson, and or I like to describe him as Andrew Jackson's right-hand man. And then in 1836, would become the 8th President of the United States. And I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself. I meant to share the concerns of the time period, but it's not too late. So in this time period, new states are joining the Union. So we, in our textbooks, it would, or biographies of politicians, it would say westward expansion. And just to kind of think about what the country was like when Martin Van Buren was a law apprentice, Ohio was considered the frontier. And then Michigan came into the Union as the 26th state when Martin Van Buren was president. And connected to that would be the economy. As people moved west, there was extension of credit to these settlers, and that extension of credit would later set up a house of cards that collapsed just as Martin Van Buren became president, and inherited the financial panic of 1837, which lasted for 6 years and was really responsible for Martin Van Buren not having a second term as the 8th president. So and tied also to the economy would be, and land use would be, the future of Native Americans, particularly in the southeastern states, as Southerners wanted to expand their plantations, and also the future of enslaved people. And Martin Van Buren was very familiar with the institution of slavery, and this question would be on the table throughout his entire political career. He had grown up in a household that included 6 enslaved people, and the process towards gradual emancipation in New York started shortly after the American Revolution, and would be approximately 20 years when all enslaved people were emancipated. And some of them did not wait for that process. It depends on who writes the accounts, but they might be described as runaway slaves, or they might be described as attempting emancipation. The reason I share that early on here is that for Martin Van Buren, he, in order to advance his political career, he and many politicians did this, took the middle ground, opposing the extension of slavery into those Western territories, with the thought that if enough free states came into the Union, there would be pressure on the politicians in Southern states where slavery was still allowed, to also put into place a timeline of self-emancipation. I'm sure that there are other topics that I might be leaving out, so I'm just going to consult my notes here and see where I'm at. And I touched on this just a little bit briefly, that Martin Van Buren worked very closely with Andrew Jackson, organizing what we think of as the Democratic Party. And these two gentlemen, they complemented each other. They had very different temperaments, very different leadership styles. It was said that Martin Van Buren, during his time as Jackson's advisor, worked political magic behind the scenes. One of the nicknames that he considered a compliment was the Little Magician. Another was the Red Fox of Kinderhook, and it doesn't really show here, but as a younger gentleman, Martin Van Buren had red hair. So the idea of being sly like a fox, and in addition to the hair color, went along with that nickname. So I'm going to just pause here and see if there are any questions or any curiosities have come to mind. And also change the picture, because we've been looking at this one for quite a while.
Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat or.
All right.
Q&A
Hopefully I'm not
area.
talking too fast. I've got this great view out the window. So it's a little distracting to me, but I will persevere. So here's a slide that I had left in, and I'm glad I did now, because it explains, it lets us see in print here a little bit about Martin Van Buren's his life and his career. So married to Hannah Hoos in 1807, and I promise not to quiz you on dates, but they were both in their early 20s, and lived in Hudson, lived in Albany. There are these five boys listed here. Winfield passed away as an infant, which is why I didn't share his name earlier. And Hannah was ill off and on through her adult life with tuberculosis, and she passed away in 1819 in her mid-30s, and that's close to 20 years before Martin Van Buren would become president. So the question on your mind might be like, what about these little guys? Like, how old were they? What happens to them? So oldest son Abraham was 10 years old, a pre-teenager, and the sons are spaced pretty close to 2 or 3 years apart. Smith was the youngest as a toddler, and these little boys were folded into the household of Hannah's brother, Moses, who was married with a family, and he lived just across the river in Catskill. So they live mostly with their aunt and uncle. That's not to say they don't see their father, although there aren't really any clear accounts of some time spent with the families. And then by the time Van Buren is vice president, and then during Andrew Jackson's administration, and then Jackson's chosen successor, all of these little guys are young adults. And they would often spend time in Kinderhook with their father. And I'm going to just linger on here a little bit longer. Abraham married, studied at West Point, and married a Southern belle, Angelica Singleton, who was a relative of Dolly Madison. If we pull on the thread of one person in this time period, it's connected to all kinds of other people. John married Elizabeth Vanderpool from Kinderhook. Martin Jr. is the bachelor in the family here. He could spend time with his nieces and nephews and then send them back to their parents. And then Smith also married to a young woman, Ellen. So out of these 4 adult sons, and 3 of whom were married, the next generation would include 10 grandchildren for Martin and Hannah. So I'll keep them in mind because we're going to circle back around to some more family details as well. Let's see here what this next picture looks like. So I put together a short PowerPoint giving a little overview of the rooms in the house, because that also helps tell the story. So for this one here, a welcome, if you will, one of my coworkers in period clothing for a special event, ready to welcome visitors through the family entrance of President Van Buren's home. And in the next one, there's one more door between that entrance and this formal dining room, which I was sharing with Tammy, is when we were doing a practice session here, is a highlight of the house, both in the 1800s and now. Oh, I love this question. What sort of farming did he do in later life? And we are definitely going to touch on that. So for Van Buren, he was 54 years old when he was elected president, and had bought this house during his first and what turned out to be only term in office, and came home in his mid-50s. He would be the 3rd owner of this house. It was built for another Dutch family named Van Ness. And then there was one owner between the Van Nesses and the Van Burens, who's best described as an absentee landowner. He was holding the deed as a favor to the Van Ness family when they had some financial concerns that they never quite got squared away. So perfect opportunity for Van Buren to come home after 40 years away, practicing law, practicing politics. His story is not quite rags to riches, but it's fairly close. The son of a tavern keeper, being mostly self-educated, having a very successful career. Some of it is right place, right time, right decision making. And he comes home to the life of a gentleman farmer. And I'm going to circle back around to that too. When we get back to the family here, I'm trying to find the right way to advance this slide. This is the next slide here is going to be another picture of the dining room. I think I have lost my way on my screen here. So I apologize. There we go. So this is a little less washed out with the extra light from the open Dutch door, a little section of wallpaper. And this is, I guess, is a teaser to invite you to come to the house, because in the 1970s, the house was still privately lived in. That's 110 years after the Van Burens, privately lived in that whole time by 5 different families. None of them related to the Van Burens, because the house was sold out of the family 2 years after the president passed away. So 1864, privately lived in until the 1970s. And I like to give extra credit to the post Martin Van Buren families for not making any outrageous changes to the house. If time travel were possible, Martin Van Buren would recognize wallpapers, carpets, furniture, the interior spaces in the house, as well as the exterior spaces. And just come around here to the next slide. I purposely changed things up a little bit for this conversation, and ordinarily the servants area waits until the end on historic house tours. And I wanted to kind of bump them up, that the community at Lindenwald, in addition to Martin Van Buren and adult sons with their wives and families visiting for the most part. They didn't necessarily live there all year long, but if there was a dinner party planned upstairs, the household servants are working downstairs in the kitchen and the laundry areas that we're going to see here. And Catherine Kelly is a young lady in her 20s of Irish descent, born in the United States, and she is a great representative of the household servants, since she's included in the Kinderhook census. And this ties into the kind of farming that Martin Van Buren would do. He developed with the help of a farm manager doing the heavy lifting and farm hands, a sizable apple orchard and a slightly smaller pear orchard. There was a kitchen garden just off the back corner of the house, which is right outside would have been right outside the kitchen here. And then he also, in addition to selling the seedlings of apple trees and pear trees, he also would sell grain, the hay, the barley, the oats, to as far south as New York City to be used for animal feed, as an example. So what I'm leading up to is that he had over 200 acres of a working farm, and most of that land is still in agricultural use today under the business name of Roxbury Farm. There is one small parcel that was subdivided at some point here in modern times, and is privately owned. So one little section kind of carved out there. So sometimes I ponder, this is really a question that probably can't be answered, but who is busier, the cook or the laundress? And if I had to pick one or the other, I would say the cook is very busy with helpers, because 3 meals a day for up to 20 people, and including the occasional traveler, would keep everyone busy, where laundry might be a couple of times a week. But so we're very fortunate at Martin Van Buren National Historic Site, or Lindenwald as they called the property, named after the linden or basswood trees, that this part of the house has also been restored, so we can fold in the stories of people who were working behind the scenes. Got a couple more pictures here through the servant space, and I hope the writing shows up on the top. It's kind of hidden away for me, but the servants' dining room. And then the next picture here, a little glimpse into an example of, an example of a servant's bedroom. And the way the house is set up today, these are basement areas that are part of a house tour. And then there, on the other side of that little window there is a recently opened section of the house. The restoration projects do continue. So a poured concrete floor was removed, was considered an archaeological project, and underneath were field stones and perhaps Kinderhook Creek stones used as the foundation. And those areas would have been the original storage in the house for ice, a root cellar for fruits and vegetables. In the president's time, and I should have said this when we were back in the kitchen, so I'm gonna hopefully not make you dizzy and bring you back here. I went too far, or not far enough. In the president's time, a modern water pump was included, and also what was then a modern coal cook stove. So there was lots of behind the scenes storage in the house. And those spaces today, they have the modern heating and ventilation system. So we're gonna, through the magic of PowerPoint here, go back upstairs to the house. And this is the breakfast room that was used for meals when Martin Van Buren did not have a house full of company. And here, the portrait on the wall is of Angelica Singleton, who married to the oldest son, Abraham. Just a little bit of trivia there, not to leave her out. And then this next picture is of the family parlor, and let me get the date right. In 1974, when the park was established, and it really did take an act of Congress. Sometimes we joke about things taking so long, but the efforts to have the house and surrounding acres, about 20 acres, I think it is, become part of the National Park Service started in the early 1900s, right around the time of World War I. And the Park Service was brand new then. The house privately lived in by multiple generations of a family named DePross, and they were still building fires in the fireplaces using Martin Van Buren's furniture. There were 5 sleigh beds that never left the house. Members, I should back up. They were creative to hang on to the house during the Depression and World War II years. Mrs. DePross served afternoon tea on Sundays and also Sunday evening dinners. There are some menus in our museum collection. So, and these are the kinds of rooms here, like the family parlor, and then in a minute we'll see the formal parlor. And this is where those afternoons of tea and evening dinners would have been arranged. So, and that's probably, I'm gonna just a little side note, it's probably hard to pick out the wallpapers, but the wallpaper patterns, the drapes and the carpets, this is a really kind of outrageous yellow and green pattern, are all reproductions of the time period based on some fragments found in nooks and crannies, and based on some household records. And wait until you see the next room. I don't know if it really does it justice, but this is the family parlor, or I'm sorry, formal parlor, or the red room. And through the archway, the little breakfast room that we saw earlier in a larger photograph. I think I see another question. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast. What role did Martin Van Buren play in the creation and enforcement of the Indian Removal Act during Jackson's administration, and his own, including the Trail of Tears? Okay. And then, is there a consensus among historians, if that's a heavy question, if Martin Van Buren's actions were genocidal, and what is the Parks Department? And then who played the harp? So that was back, let me start with the harp question, because that is a shorter answer. It was back in the other room. Van Buren's daughter-in-law, Angelica, played the harp, and it was fairly common for the young ladies of the time period to have reading and poetry and music as part of their education. I should share that the harp is in this picture, or in the other picture, which I'm going to try to go back to, but it is not currently on display in the house. Let me see if I can get back there. Is it not highlighting that section? There we go. So here was the harp in the family parlor. So back to the formal parlor. I'm going to skip ahead just to see what the next picture is, but the library. Okay, so back here. This is a perfect room to talk about Andrew Jackson. Even though we can't see his portrait, there's on the left here is a reproduction portrait of Jefferson, and on the right of the arch would be a reproduction portrait of Andrew Jackson. So diving into the Trail of Tears, and I'm glad you asked, because last year, or 2 years ago now, when we did not have access to the house because these spaces are really small, and there was concern about the ability to social distance, I put together an outdoor talk on the Trail of Tears, and so Thomas Jefferson's or the Louisiana Purchase during Thomas Jefferson's time opened up the Southeast for the extension of plantations, and the land that was inhabited by more than one tribe, but the Cherokee are the ones that are seem to be the most prominent. That was wanted by enslavers. So that sets up this time period between the American Revolution and the Trail of Tears during Andrew Jackson's administration, where there are over 20 treaties between the U.S. government, and they were not always voluntary. There was pressure on the Southeastern tribes to agree to these treaties, but each one of these approximately 25 treaties squeezed a little bit more of their lifestyle and squeezed a little bit more of their land. And there were some Cherokee who adapted into the lifestyle of the settlers, and then others resisted, including a principal chief whose name was John Ross. His mother was Cherokee, his father was Scottish, and he was the principal chief who, right up until the last group of Cherokee left, was traveling back and forth to Washington, D.C., trying to reverse these treaties. And his wife died, and you might have to invite me back for a whole other talk, but John Ross's wife died along the Trail of Tears. They had two sons who later lived through the time period of Civil War. So for Martin Van Buren, he, the last group of Native Americans left, I'm going back to the question, left Georgia during his presidency. I don't know. So he enforced that part. And the Cherokee traveled in groups of close to 1,000 people. So and I'm not like excusing the decisions here during the Jackson administration and the Van Buren administration. I don't think Van Buren could have reversed the decisions there. So as far as historians and Martin Van Buren's actions, he was not empathetic to the Cherokee at that point. And on my tours, as far as as a tour guide, I like to share the stories out and then respond to what visitors have to say, like what's their opinion. And it's not, I never try to change anyone's mind because there are so many different like parts to these stories, the enslavement of African Americans, children born to enslaved parents, or one parent is enslaved and one parent is the enslaver. There are a lot of threads to really pull on. And I'm not trying to change the topic, but the question of enslavement is as big as the question of the Trail of Tears. Shrink this back down here for a second.
We have one other question in the chat, just not related, but wondering if okay comes from Old Kinderhook, yes, and Martin Van Buren signing documents that way.
Right. So, and there's a yes and a no to that question. That in the Van Buren, I'm going to just expand a little bit on the background. So Van Buren was involved in some way in every election between 1828 and 1832 when Jackson was elected. So kind of on the periphery there, but he supports Andrew Jackson, was encouraging the Democrats from New York to Virginia to compromise to keep their candidates in office. And then in 1836, he's at the height of his career. The Democrats are super organized. He's their only candidate. They did call him Old Kinderhook. He soundly defeats the multiple candidates from different regions of the country at the time that were put forth by the Whig Party. The Whig Party was formed for the sole purpose of opposing Andrew Jackson. So for Martin Van Buren in 1836, he's at the height of his career. He inherits this first major financial crisis. The Whigs call him Martin Van Ruin. He spends his entire administration working towards establishment of an independent treasury, similar to today's Federal Reserve System, and that passes Congress just before he leaves office. So as far as signing documents, there's not any specific proof that he signed his papers okay. I'll share though the origin of okay. Martin Van Buren and the Democrats are responsible for okay being part of our modern language. That there were okay clubs to support the Democrats. There's a gentleman whose name is Alan Reed, and he was interested enough in, I'm just giving us a new picture to look at. He was interested enough in the origins of OK to research and write a 200 pages. And it OK first appeared in a Boston newspaper in 1839. As a play on words, it was a purposeful misspelling of all correct. So with an O and a K instead of an A and a C. Hopefully I said that right. So if Martin Van Buren hadn't been running for re-election in 1840, it probably would have been forgotten the very next time an issue of the newspaper came out. So even though we have yet to find a document with OK written on it, there is a great connection. And I'm going to share just a little bit more about that while we're on the topic, that President Van Buren's papers are on microfilm through the Library of Congress. And there's a group of students at Cumberland University under the direction of their professor. So it's a multi-year project, who are transcribing his papers and making them available online. So maybe they'll come across something at some point in time. But for right now, I chuckle a little because I think it would be really neat. But it's there's the chances are fairly slim, since the president didn't save too many of his personal papers, and his handwriting is super hard to read, but the work continues on those political papers, which that kind of transitions right into Martin Van Buren's library here. I call it the man cave. There are some, they're tiny and I didn't blow them up, but there are some great political cartoons on the wall here, and they show Van Buren as the Red Fox of Kinderhook. They show him pressing on in spite of the diminishing returns when he was hoping for what would have been a non-consecutive second term. And the biggest question here in the 1840s was connected to new states coming into the Union. Would they be free states? Would they be slave states? So for Van Buren, soundly, going to back up for just a minute, soundly defeated in 1840 by Harrison and Tyler, better remembered as Tippecanoe and Tyler too. And then Harrison died 30 days into office with pneumonia. So Van Buren sees this window of opportunity that he might have a non-consecutive second term. So leading up to 1844, he's out campaigning, which is a fairly new idea, campaigns at the time. The Whigs portrayed him as an aristocrat since he owned this large house, which would later have up to close to 30 rooms. There was an addition during his retirement, but he and with Harrison had moved into. So I'm backing up again. Harrison had moved into a log cabin on his plantation to claim that he was a log cabin president. So for Van Buren, he's out and about campaigning, and in 1844. The question is, will Texas come into the Union as a free state or a slave state? Van Buren opposed Texas at the time, and that cost him the nomination. It took the Democrats 9 ballots to decide on a candidate, and they chose Polk over Van Buren. Polk was willing to accept Texas. And then one more fast forward here, Van Buren, so he was elected in 36, defeated in 1840. In 44, the nomination went to Polk. And then in 48, Van Buren takes a stronger stand against the extension of slavery. He's encouraged by his son, John, to do that. But he's not happy with the direction of the Democrats. And he runs as a third party candidate for a very short-lived Free Soil Party, which was one of the factions of Democrats in this time period leading up to Civil War. And both of the parties would have factions. The Whigs would re-emerge as the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln. So in a round, one of my coworkers says in a direct way, I think it's a little more roundabout. Van Buren is responsible for both of the political parties that we have today, even though their philosophies and platforms are not exactly comparable to the 1800s, but he organized the Democrats in the 1820s and 30s with Andrew Jackson, and then he parted ways with them in the 1840s, and the Republican Party comes about as well because of factions during this time period. bear with me here for a second. We'll see what the next slide is. I think we're still gonna segue here, and I'm also watching the clock because it's already 6:45. I'm like, how does that happen? But this is an image of one of the guest rooms in the House, and a very well-known guest would be Kentucky Senator Henry Clay, who visited right around the same time Van Buren was running, had run as a third-party candidate for the Free Soil Party. And Henry Clay and Martin Van Buren both had the skill of being able to put aside political differences and maintain a personal friendship. Clay's visit was just a few months before introducing the bills that would become the Compromise of 1850. And I'm going to add another person into the story here because we try to share this, just like we do with the household servants, the stories of other people who names are not always like up front and center. So Clay was traveling with someone he would have called a servant, although enslaved valet is more accurate. And I picture Levi. So we consulted with the curatorial staff and the interpretive staff down at Ashland in Kentucky, Henry Clay's home, and came up with the idea that Levi probably slept on a bedroll here at the foot of the bed that Henry Clay would have occupied. So I picture him like that's there, and try to look at the visit from his point of view for just a little bit on my tours through the house too, that he would have been at the on the fringe of the dinner hour in the formal dining room, or in the maybe breakfast in the breakfast room as these conversations about the Compromise of 1850 are happening. And in particular, Levi was known to attempt self-emancipation, and they were traveling on their way home from an extended stay in Saratoga. So he would have been listening to these conversations that had a direct effect on his future, and in particular, they're part of the Compromise of 1850, with some concessions on the part of Northern politicians and some on the part of Southern politicians, was that the Fugitive Slave Act made the consequences for assisting a runaway slave, for a person attempting self-emancipation, a lot stronger, possible jail time. There could be fines, and I don't have dollar amounts here, but people would think twice about, the idea was that people would think twice about assisting a runaway slave. Just getting into the chat for a minute about farming operations. We'll definitely, I'll be able to come back around to that. Now I have to figure out if I can shrink the chat for the next, there we go, for the next picture here. Levi kind of fades, not kind of, he does fade out of the records, whether it's in New York or in Kentucky. So it's not exactly known how long he lived, whether he was able to achieve emancipation, but it helps us tour guides and visitors help learn a little bit more about the time frame. So we've come back around here to Martin Van Buren's bedroom. And he was ill off and on through his adult life with not tuberculosis. That was his wife, Hannah, and then later adult son, Martin Jr., who predeceased him. But Van Buren in later years was ill with asthma, passed away in July of 1862. It's during the second year of American Civil War. He is buried in Kinderhook, as are Martin Jr. And Hannah. And before I dive into a couple of questions I saw there, I'd like to share a quote from Abraham Lincoln. And it's tradition for the current president to have to make a statement when a former president passes away. So Lincoln would say, the president with deep regret announces to the people of the United States the decease at Kinderhook, New York, of his honored predecessor, Martin Van Buren. This event will occasion mourning in the nation for the loss of a citizen and a public servant whose memory will be gratefully cherished. Although it has occurred at a time when his country is afflicted with division and civil war, the grief of his patriotic friends will measurably be lessened by the consciousness that while suffering with disease and seeing his end approaching. His prayers were for the restoration of the authority of the government of which he had been the head, and for peace and goodwill among his fellow citizens. Flags were flown at half staff when Martin Van Buren passed away. As the word went out to areas where troops were active, there was a 13-gun salute in the morning to represent the original states, and then a 34-gun salute in the evening to reflect the number of states during Van Buren's lifetime, with Kansas being the 34th state coming into the Union as part of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which I was like, how much about that do I share? But there were compromises through Van Buren's entire life, from the Missouri Compromise to which prohibited slavery in the former Louisiana territory, except for boundaries within the proposed state of Missouri. And then the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealed the Missouri Compromise, and it allowed the white male settlers in those territories to vote and to decide whether slavery would be allowed or not. So there, it was aside from the death of a president, it's the midst of civil war, and that Van Buren was not considered we make a big jump here, but he was not considered a very successful president during his lifetime. It's only later that history is a little kinder to him, in the sense that he was involved in the development of the government that we're familiar with today, the two-party system in particular. So, take another quick look at the chat here. I know it was a question about his farming operations, what he grew. I don't want to leave that out, but I'm just going to quick look and see what the next picture is here. It's one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to save that. Okay, so for the farming operation, Van Buren on the front lawn shown here would have had a meadow with sheep grazing out front. There were also chickens and cows. To the right of the house, we can't quite see it in these pictures, but the fruit orchards with apple trees and pear trees. And currently the projects do continue at the park. So I'm glad you asked this question. My manager, Megan, is in the very early stages of the long-term plan. It might be a 10-year process to continue planning and putting the steps in motion to thin out the modern black cherry trees, keep the underbrush like at bay, if you will, with my maintenance coworkers use the brush mowers for that. And then there are some fruit trees being nurtured at a local arboretum, so that at some point in time, there will be a little bit of the orchard established. And then the vegetable garden, it would have been pretty similar to the vegetables we think about today. Tomatoes, cucumbers, lots of different kinds of squash. For the farm fields, potatoes were considered a cash crop. Van Buren was connected to the Shakers, who were also very active with what we think of as modern agriculture in this time today, but it really isn't, because in the 1850s, people were coming up with irrigation techniques and practicing crop rotation, using lots of manure as fertilizer. So this may not be an exact answer to your question, but they the farm fields included, a lot of it was dedicated to potatoes, which could be a cash crop, and these different kinds of grains that could be used either for bread and pies or animal feed from farms to farms as far south as New York City. Let's see what the next slide brings here. So this is one of my favorite quotes that kind of ties into what we do at Martin Van Buren today. In addition to house tours, we have outreach programs. There is an evening campfire program coming up in October. I'm not sure of the date yet, but we could definitely let people know. There will be some publicity locally, newspapers, on our social media pages, things like that. And the focus is going to be on Washington Irving, who met partly because he and Martin Van Buren met in England in the 1830s. They were traveling there at the same time. So we all haven't done a bike tour in a while, but I remember suiting up in my early years as a seasonal ranger, green shorts, brown shoes and socks. So definitely a fashion statement here, and going on some bicycling tours around the county. We also, in addition, there's a picture of trails here. So specifically Ranger John, who has moved on to other adventures, but he's doing some work over at the nature trail in this particular picture. And then since then, we also have a Dutch heritage trail that connects the Van Buren house with the Van Allen house. And then hot off the press at Pro Printers any day now is a walking trail around the park where I get to use my science skills again. We have 11 trees that we monitor. They're the kinds of trees that were here in Martin Van Buren's time, from apple trees to pear trees to black cherry trees, locust, a sycamore tree was probably here when the house was built. And to have another outdoor opportunity, we have a sign for each species of trees out on the park. So that's encouragement for some of you. I know there's like 40 of us on the call, but for those of you that are close enough to come visit, to take advantage of either a house tour or some of these outdoor activities. This one's probably extraneous right now, but has our mailing address. And then I think I'm back around to my favorite quote again: do not let the service become just another government bureau. Keep it youthful, vigorous, clean, and strong. I think about this every day because of great conversations, always more to learn, and putting on the uniform. And you only got a quick glimpse of it, but I never have to decide what to wear in the morning. And this is like the best job for me. So I'm kind of circling back around to something I said in the beginning. The Park Service is I describe it sometimes as a little tongue in cheek as the warm and fuzzy part of the government. So, I mean, there are times that I'm not particularly pleased with the way things are going. And I'm not talking about my work, I'm talking about topics that I probably shouldn't venture off too much into. But it's interesting to learn like the history of antebellum politics and what's the same today and what's very different. So I will just leave that thought there. Oh, the website again, I would love to do that. So we have nps.gov MAVA. Yep, so that's the page right there in the chat. A Google search for Martin Van Buren or National Park Service will bring up the web page. And for those of you that have jumped into social media, we have a Facebook page, and this is National Park Fashion Week. So I've got some very creative coworkers who've been busy posting. And then we also have an Instagram account, and when we can keep up, we have a Twitter account. So those are all possibilities out there. I think Instagram is my favorite right now. So thank you for the compliments. I'm seeing a couple of them. And also Renata, I may have your name right. I hope so. It is definitely possible to volunteer. Once or twice a month. There's a link on our website where it's possible to send me an email. It doesn't have my my name on it, but it comes to my inbox. Oh, I just came around. Sorry if I disabled the chat. It's possible. So it says interesting here, and then I'm probably going to need to let you go, aren't I? That Martin Van Buren Jr. was the third son. So oldest son, Abraham, was named after the president's father. I'm not exactly sure how John, the second son, comes to be John. And then for Martin Jr. to be the third son, fourth son, Smith Thompson Van Buren, also has an interesting story behind his name. President Van Buren had a friend, a chief justice, whose first name was Smith and last name was Thompson. So his youngest son, Smith Thompson Van Buren, gets like all of it put together. So super, super interesting story behind his name in a way. And it probably wouldn't fit on any ordinary signature line. Road trip for sure. All right.
Okay, that's great. I think, yeah, I think you've inspired a lot of people to make a visit to Lindenwold.
Looks like people are starting to filter out. So thank you all very much. I'm sorry you couldn't see me, but in a way it's all right because I talk with my hands a lot.
And so, yeah, thank you everybody for coming. We have recorded it and I will send out the link to the video once we have it up on our YouTube site. So if you want to come back and look at it again or share it with some of your friends and family, that's all possible. So just to remind you, we have 3 more coming up. The next one is actually looking at Washington Irving's friendship with Van Buren. And that is on, I just had it up in the calendar. Let's see, that is on the 3rd of October. So, and then the following ones after that look at Van Buren and slavery specifically. And then the final one looks a little bit more at the house in detail and some of the wallpaper and, you know, the details of the reconstruction. So I hope to see some of you at those future presentations. So thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Dawn.
All right. Take care, folks.